Mr. Charlie has not fulfilled the degree of care towards the appellant due to insufficient warning of the danger which exists in the garden. Secondly, the danger was created by respondent himself. And thirdly, the appellant shall not be deemed as a trespasser in this circumstance. In addressing the first point, the appellant submits that the respondent has breached his duties as an occupier. Benny is deemed as a licensee as he entered the premises while with Charlie's express gratuitous permission to enter his garden for the purpose of searching for the missing Air Jordan silver shoes. My ladies and my lord, the appellant would like to make reference to a Supreme Court case of Datuk Bandar Dewan Bandaraya and Ong Kok Peng, which provides the degree of care owed by an occupier towards a licensee. It was stated that the occupier's duty is to take reasonable care not to expose the licensee to hidden perils and to warn him of existing traps or concealed danger.
Counsel, I don't think we have a situation of a concealed trap or hidden danger here when there's clearly a hole and there's clearly construction tape that should tell your client to not go and climb inside. Am I right?
Indeed, my lord. But to answer my lord's question, although the construction pit is an obvious danger, the thing that caused the appellant to tumble into the construction pit is in fact the loose soil. Hence, the appellant view is that the loose soil is the concealed danger. Does that answer my lord's question?
Yeah, sorry. My learned sister was asking a question.
Sorry. May I just check with you, because you talk about concealed dangers, but to begin with, the construction tape was already surrounding the pit. So isn't that sufficient notice?
Yes, my lady. To answer my lady's question, it is in fact the construction tape has in fact surrounding the construction pit, but it's surrounding the perimeter of the construction pit. It does not mention whether there are extra spaces left from the construction pit or it's just the perimeter.
What we are clear of, Counsel, is that the area where your client was injured is within the taped up area. Am I right?
It's actually at the edge of the pit.
So, and that was where there was a construction tape, right? If you say it's the perimeter, that means it's the edge, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if there is a tape there, I mean, are you saying that the respondent has to list out each and every single danger? Is that your case, Counsel?
No, my lord, that is not what the appellant tried to convey. What the appellant tries to convey is that the respondent should at least erect some warning or warn our client verbally.
Right.
But in this case, they did not do so.
If I can interject you there. Now, essentially, you accept that there's construction tape around the perimeters. The soil is within that area of the construction tape. So that is why the question is, what more is there a need to notify anyone of any dangers? That tape in itself is sufficient warning. Would you agree with that?
My lady, the appellant could not agree with that because the appellant thinks that the construction tape is insufficient warning to the appellant because the construction pit was actually at the backyard. And upon entering the garden, the appellant was not told that there was a construction pit or a construction tape at the backyard. Does that answer my lady's question?
Thank you.
Much obliged. If I may direct my ladyship and my lord to paragraph 6 of the moot problem, the appellant was injured due to the loose soil, which caused him to tumble into the hole, as mentioned upon answering my ladies and my lord's question. The trial judge in the case of Sarima binti Peri and Pendakwa Raya defined concealed danger as a danger which is not known or obvious to the licensee using reasonable care. Applying this to the case in hand, the appellant contends that there is a concealed danger with two reasonings. First, The appellant did not have knowledge about the loose soil and would not be able to tell by its appearance. Second, the existence of loose soil was unexpected. However, the loose soil should be known or obvious to the respondent since the construction was done in his premises. The respondent's actual knowledge of the condition of the pit will be helped to appreciate the danger if a reasonable man would do so. Based on the Singapore Court of Appeal case of Wohab and China Insurance, the duty owed by Charlie to Benny was to warn him of concealed dangers actually known to them, but neither known or obvious to Benny. Hidden dangers will require greater attention to be drawn to them since any visitors cannot be relied upon to avoid them on their own volition.
Can I just stop you there? Now, isn't it a case where respondent Benny went under the tape, if I'm not mistaken, correct? To retrieve the shoe or something. So there's the construction tape and he went under to retrieve it. So
yes, my lady.
Is that the case?
Yes, my lady.
So is it a case where no fault then should be attributable to the Charlie?
My apologies, my lady. But just so I can provide with an accurate answer, can my lady repeat the question?
Wouldn't it be a case because Benny went under the tape, then no fault lies with anyone else aside from Benny? Would that be an accurate summation?
Yes, my lady. But in this case, since as the appellant submit, the appellant did not know about the loose soil at the first place. So if he was warned upon entering the garden, he would have avoided leaning down to grab his shoes. He would have think of an alternative way to grab the shoes.
Counsel, can I just clarify? You are saying that the respondent should have known about the loose soil, but we do not know for a fact whether or not he knew about the loose soil or not. Am I right?
Yes, my lord.
So if he didn't know, assuming he didn't know, or whether we don't think that it's reasonable for him to know, because we do not know who was actually constructing the swimming pool, it would follow then that he could not have warned your client of a danger that he didn't know. Am I right?
Yes, my lord. Okay. Well, if the respondent did not warn about the loose soil, he could have warned about the construction pit instead and asked our client to be more careful about it.
Okay.
Much obliged. With the due permission of my ladyships and lordship, I will now move on to my second point. Much obliged. To further elaborate, the appellant would like to shed light onto the federal court case of Lembaga Kemajuan, Tanah Persekutuan and Mariam, which held that a person owes a duty of care even to a person who has no contractual relationship with him, and that his liability to an injured person depends upon whether the injury was caused by his act or omission. Applying to the instant case, the danger was created by the respondent whereby he left the giant pit hole unattended. Since the appellant told Charlie that he was desperate in finding his shoes, the respondent should have known that the appellant would take all recourse to find his shoes in the garden, which does not preclude entering the backyard. To further support this argument, the respondent could not simply put the burden on the appellant to determine the difference between a garden and a backyard. To elaborate further, it is of anyone's common knowledge that the garden and backyard are not separated due to the similar transition and the absence of any discernible boundaries as noted down in point 6 of the clarification. Therefore, the appellant is allowed to just walk around the premises.
Would it be argued, counsel, that your client assumed the risk when he leaned under what was very visibly the construction tape?
Yes, my lord.
Okay.
Much obliged. Moving on to my last point, the appellant contends that the respondent owes a duty of care to him as Benny is a licensee and not a trespasser. The respondent would like to reproduce the words uttered by the respondent from paragraph 5 of the moot problem. Good luck looking for your ridiculous shoes in my garden, and you can let yourself out when your treasure hunt is over. This can be inferred that the respondent impliedly permitted the appellant to stay within the premises until he managed to find his shoes. As such, the appellant would conclude that he is still a licensee. Furthermore, in a recent federal court case of Tenaga Nasional Berhad and Bukit Lenang Development Sendirian Berhad, it was stated that trespass consists of the intentional intrusion of another's land in which appellant's state of mind may be relevant in determining whether or not he is a trespasser. If I could direct your ladyship's and lordship attention to the clarifications point number 6 and 7, which express that the backyard and garden were not separated by any discernible boundary. It can be seen
Counsel, I don't think there is an issue, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's an issue of whether your client was a trespasser into the respondent's house. I think the issue here is whether he trespassed through the construction tape. Counsel, I think that is the issue. If you could address us, our minds to that question.
My lord, to answer your question, what the appellant was trying to convey is that we are preemptively saying that it may be disputed that our client is a trespasser, as he was permitted to enter to his garden only and not the backyard. Hence, we were bringing up this point to address that issue.
I see. Okay.
Much obliged. If the appellant was unaware that the backyard and the garden are separated, then his mental state would be that they are connected. Hence, it is possible for him to assume that the backyard is part of the garden and would not think that he is trespassing, especially when the two areas have no boundaries and that the respondent did not warn the appellant about the danger. My ladies and my lord, the court may draw reference to a UK case of Spearman and Royal United Bath and HS Trust, where the court propounded that whether a person is or is not a trespasser is not solely determined by whether the place where they are is or is not an authorized place. A person's state of mind and intention is an important additional factor. The position may be different if the appellant deliberately entered an area marked no entry, but if the appellant simply makes a mistake and goes to the wrong way, it could not possibly be suggested that such a person was not a trespasser. My ladies and my lord, I'm aware that my time is running up. May I request for an extension of 1.5 minutes?
Yes.
Much obliged. In the event that the Court of Appeal later decide that the appellant have erred in proving that the appellant is a licensee, relying on the federal court case of Lembaga Elektrik Negara Malaysia and Ramakrishnan, the appellant would like to submit that even if the appellant is a trespasser, the respondent still did not discharge his duty of care as an occupier to take reasonable steps of common humanity and common sense to avoid danger or to provide warnings to trespassers who might be on the premises, as the probability of harm in spite of such precaution is still unreasonably great. If people are in fact likely to encounter the danger, the duty of reasonable care to ensure that the premises is reasonably safe is not satisfied by a simple warning. For instance, the respondent could have erected warnings or even warned the appellant verbally about the construction pit by asking him not to go near the premises, which he had failed to do so, as submitted in my first point. Unless I may be of any assistance, it is for these reasons that the respondent urged the court to allow the appeal.
If no further questions, my learned brothers and sisters.
I'm fine, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Much obliged. My co-counsel will now address the second ground of appeal.
May it please this honorable court. My name is Tan Chen and I am the second counsel representing the appellant. Turning to the second ground of appeal, the appellant wishes to submit that the High Court has erred in finding that the appellant is liable for defamation. In addressing this issue, the appellant has two main points in supporting that he shall not be held liable for defamation. First, respondent has failed to satisfy the second element required to prove a defamation case. Secondly, the appellant would like to bring up two defenses, that is, the defense of justification and fair comment. First of all, the appellant would like to point out to the court that the second element of the test, as established in the landmark case of Ayub Saud T.S. Sambam Purmuti, was not satisfied by the respondent. The second element of the test requires the words to sufficiently refer to the respondent. This is to be judged objectively according to the authority laid down in Pardeep Kumar and Abdullah Sani bin Hashim. There are two questions to be answered. First, whether the defamatory words can be regarded as being capable of referring to Mr. Charlie, followed by whether a reasonable person who knows Mr. Charlie would conclude that the defamatory words refer to him. In the present case, it is not sufficiently clear that the respondent's statement indeed referred to Mr. Charlie as alleged by him.
But
If
counsel, Mr. Charlie
Lord?
he's the only officer from the bureau staying in La Mirage, right?
No, my lord, if I could clarify that, you can identify from item 8 in the clarification document that there are actually a few members from the Prevention Bureau who lives in La Mirage. Therefore, Mr. Charlie cannot be the only member who lives in that neighborhood.
But he's the highest ranking member in the bureau that stays there.
Yes, my lord, I agree with that. But in the statement as published by the respondent, it was only stated that a high-ranking member of the COVID-19 Bureau. It didn't mention the highest-ranking member.
I see.
Thank you. My lord, may I
Not the
proceed?
only high-ranking member. Is that what you're submitting?
No, what I'm submitting is that the statement didn't mention that it is the highest-ranking member. So the statement might refer to other high-ranking members who also lives in La Mirage. In this case, Mr. Charlie is the highest-ranking member, but the statement published by the respondent didn't specifically mention that it is the highest-ranking member.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, my lady. May I proceed?
But counsel, we know that as a result of that, the respondent was sacked from the bureau. As a result of your client going around and telling people that, obviously they were able to zoom in and identify the respondent as being the person, am I right?
Yes, my lord, but there might be other reasons which is attributable to the fact that lead to the sack of Mr. Charlie. Because to sack a member from such an organization, there might be some other implications or some other reasons for them to make such a huge decision. So it might not be 100% attributable to the statement published by the respondent.
Counsel, I think that's a bit of a stretch. I don't think we have any information on that. I think that's a bit of an assumption.
Yes, my lord. But that is the reason that I could give.
Please continue.
Thank you. So to continue, I'll direct your ladyships and your lordship to Mr. Benny's statement, which can be found in page 2, paragraph 3 of the moot problem, which reads a high-ranking member of the COVID-19 Prevention Bureau living in La Mirage. Firstly, the statement did not mention Mr. Charlie's name. The statement of a high-ranking member is also very general, since it can be attributable to refer to a group of people who equally hold high positions in the Prevention Bureau. Besides that, according to item 8 in the clarification document as mentioned just now, there are indeed a few members from the Prevention Bureau who lives in La Mirage, and not just Mr. Charlie himself. As such, the generality of this statement made by the appellant is directed to a group of people, and it therefore cannot be capable of directing specifically to Mr. Charlie only. My ladies and my lord, the appellant would also like to refer to the case of Abdul Khalid and Party Islam Malaysia, which propounded that the alleged defamatory statement must be reasonable in the circumstances to lead a person acquainted to the plaintiff to believe that the statement referred to the plaintiff. In the present case, Mr. Benny's statement was only made to his friends.
Can I stop you there? So can you just tell us
Yes, my lady.
how do you relate those facts to the present instance? case that you've cited, how do you relate them to the present instance?
So to clarify, is my lady interested in the facts of the case that I cited?
So I'm saying you're using the case to support your argument now.
Yes.
So how do you draw the analogy? What is your basis for relying on that case?
Okay, to answer my lady's question, the analogy that I'm trying to draw is that in this present case, the statement which is published by Mr. Benny is not possible to draw reasonable people to attribute that statement to refer to Mr. Charlie himself only, because it is not in everybody's knowledge that Mr. Charlie actually lives in La Mirage. To explain, I would like to point out a common sense reasoning. Since Mr. Charlie is a it's a governmental body who holds a high position, it is unlikely that the general public will know that he lives in La Mirage. In fact, the residential address of government servants, especially one who is in a high position such as Mr. Charlie, are usually kept confidential for personal safety reasons. And therefore, only certain people who are personally close to Mr. Charlie, such as his proximate friend, my apologies, such as his proximate friends, family members, and relatives, or some high members from the bureau would know that he lives in La Mirage. Therefore, it is not reasonable to say that any person who knows Mr. Charlie will associate the appellant's statement to him. So to conclude my point, I would like to submit that since the second element of this test is not satisfied, there shall be no cause of action for the respondent to sue for defamation. Is there any question by the court, or I shall move on to my next point?
I have no question. My learned brothers and sisters.
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, my lord and my lady. Moving on to the defense that the appellant would like to raise, the first defense is the defense of justification, which can be found under Section 8 of the Defamation Act 1957. To rely successfully on this defense, the appellant would like to point to the judgment of Mary Lim in Raja Syair Abu Bakar and Manjit Singh Dillon. That is, the appellant would have to prove that the defamatory words are true or substantially true in substance and in fact. As such, the appellant would like to prove to the court that the statement told by the appellant is not without facts and substance. To support this, the respondent would like to point to the fact that Charlie's wife was screaming at someone for leaving the house after they have been in close contact with Amanda, who was alleged tested positive for COVID-19. Although not specifically mentioned in the moot problem that Charlie was actually talking to the wife, but it can be inferred from the fact that she appeared upset after she knew that Charlie had left the house, and she later quickly went back into the house. So her screaming can later be heard after that event. So it is logical to interpret that Charlie's wife was actually screaming at Charlie through a conversation through a telephone. So it could not be anyone else in the house since she uses the word, "How can you leave?"
Counsel,
Yes, my lord.
Amanda did not have COVID, am I right?
Yes, that's true.
At the end of the day, she didn't have COVID. So your question of justification here means to say that the statement has to be true, i.e. that Amanda has COVID. And as a result, Charlie should not be leaving the house and things like that. But at the end of the day, Amanda didn't have COVID. So how is your defense of justification supposed to hold any water?
To answer my lord's question, we would like to clarify that the statement that Charlie actually is going around spreading COVID-19 is a fact at that point of time before it was proven that he wasn't actually contracted COVID-19, because Amanda also didn't contracted COVID-19. But
yes,
the statement,
and the defense of justification. Sorry, my learned sister would like to ask a question. Go ahead.
I was just about to ask counsel, is there any authority that would assist the proposition that you're trying to make here? that at that point in time when the statement was made, he had thought it was true. Would there be an authority on this proposition?
To address my lady's question, there will not be an authority provided, but we would like to highlight the SOP as put forward by the Health Ministry of Malaysia in clarifying why we are of the view that the appellant is actually conveying a true fact based on the action of Mr. Charlie going around after knowing that he might have COVID-19. So may I proceed?
There is a difference here. So you're saying someone going around on the basis of he may have, or you're saying now factually he had. There is a big difference between the two.
To answer my lady's question, the fact that we are claiming is to be true is not that Mr. Charlie contracted COVID-19, but the fact that he is going around holding himself in the irresponsible manner after knowing that he might contract COVID-19, and yet he failed to self-isolate or quarantine. So it's the very action that he did not self-quarantine equalize to the statement made by the appellant that he is indeed going around spreading COVID-19.
Is this your proposition for the fair comment defense?
Yes.
Perhaps you could just address us on that so that we can understand more where your arguments are coming from.
Okay, yes, my lady. So I will now explain about the standard of procedure as set out by the Health of Ministry Malaysia. It was stated that anyone who has close contact with a COVID-19 positive patient to self-isolate for at least 14 days to curb this spreading of infection. But in the present case, the fact that Mr. Charlie has met face-to-face with the appellant and went out of the house proved that Mr. Charlie had failed to self-isolate as he was supposed to do so. Besides that, even Charlie's wife was furious at Charlie for being so irresponsible. So from this, it is not absurd for the appellant to make a statement that Mr. Charlie is actually going around spreading COVID-19 due to the contagious nature of this virus. Did I answer my lady's question?
Yes, you may proceed.
Okay, thank you, my lady. So the next defense that the appellant would like to bring up is the defense of fair comment under Section 9 of the Defamation Act 1957. The federal court in the case of Datuk Haris Muhammad Saleh and Datuk Yong Tek Lee laid down 4 requirements to be fulfilled in order to bring this defense of fair comment. First, the words complaint should be a comment. Second, the comments are based on facts. Third, the comments or opinion expressed are fair. And fourth, the comments must be of matters of public interest. Applying to the present case, the appellant's statement that Charlie is spreading COVID-19 is a comment made by him based on the words he heard from Charlie's wife, which is a fact because the appellant did not make up the fact. The second element and the first element has been satisfied, and now I'll move on to the third element, whereby the appellant's comment is deemed to be fair because it is highly probable that Charlie might have contracted with COVID-19 due to close contact.
A comment would be something like, I think somebody is going around spreading COVID-19, as opposed to someone is going around spreading COVID-19. I think one is a statement of fact, one is a comment on what they think. Wouldn't that make a difference?
Yes, my lord, but it appeared in the moot problem that it was a quotation. Perhaps the quotation as put forward in the moot problem is not the whole statement made by the respondent. So the respondent might actually have said, I think...
Or he might not. We don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
We are unsure on this fact.
To the facts that you have, don't speculate.
All right. Acknowledge, my lady. In fact, may I continue to my submission? In fact, the Ministry of Health has actually projected that a single cluster of COVID-19 alone could potentially infect around 40,000 people based on close contact. So lastly, it is also a matter of public interest. A matter of public interest is when it affects the general public or a group of people in the society, and as such raises an issue of public concern. Since the COVID-19 pandemic affects the general public across the globe, it shall be considered that it is a matter of public interest. As such, since all four elements are proven, the defense of fair comment shall succeed. It is for these reasons and the reasons given by my learned co-counsel that we argue that we urge the court to rule in favor of the appellant. Unless I can assist the court any further, these are my submissions.
My learned brothers and sisters have any further questions?
No, we'll wait for the reply.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. That's all for my submission.
My ladies and my lord, before I begin, may I check whether my audio is clear?
Yes, it is. Proceed.
Thank you, my ladies and my lord. May it please this honorable court, my name is Timothy Chow, and I appear on behalf of the respondent, Mr. Charlie, alongside with my learned co-counsel, Miss Belle. I will be addressing the first submission for 15 minutes, namely, the respondent was not liable for the injuries suffered by the appellant, whereas my learned co-counsel will be addressing the second submission for 15 minutes, namely, the appellant was liable for committing defamation against the respondent. We respectfully reserve 5 minutes for our rebuttals. In respect of the first issue of occupier's liability, the respondent submits that he is not liable for the injuries suffered by the appellant on 2 points of argument. Firstly, the necessary ingredients for occupier's liability is not satisfied. And secondly, the relevant defenses are applicable here. My ladies and my lord, the respondent accepts the citation of the law on occupier's liability made by the learned counsel for the appellant. But what needs to be kept on our mind is this. The respondent only needs to show that at least one of the elements of occupier's liability is not proven. And if that happens, then there is no liability on the part of the respondent. Therefore,
What is your authority for that?
my ladies,
What is your authority for that proposition?
my lady, to answer your question, I would like to refer to you to the case of my lady, may I seek a moment to gather myself?
Yes.
To answer your question, my lady, I would like to draw the Honorable Court's attention to the case of Shanta Anak Perempuan Manikam and Tek Ju Chan Sendirian Berhad, where it laid down the ingredients of occupier's liability, where her ladyship stated that for the purpose of occupier's liability, there will be 3 conjunctive elements to be proven, which is the occupier, the property, and the duty of care here. Therefore, that is the authority that I am referring to, my lady. Therefore, to proceed, the respondent's primary focus here will be to disprove the element of duty of care. Before determining the standard of duty owed here, the respondent first submits that the appellant is not a licensee, but rather a trespasser to the property. From the face-to-face interaction and phone conversation that is shared between the respondent and appellant, it is clear that the respondent had only expressly permitted the appellant to access the garden while searching for his missing shoes. Nevertheless, the appellant proceeded to wander into the respondent's backyard despite having clear instructions to leave the property after the search for his shoes in the garden is completed. Therefore, the appellant's presence in the backyard amounts to a trespass.
So are you saying then the backyard and the garden cannot be equated on the same footing? Not all part of the same area?
My lady, to answer your question, I would like to draw the Honourable Court's attention to clarification number 7 from the clarification form, where it states that the garden and the backyard are two separate areas of the house. The garden is the area in the front and the side of the house, whereas the backyard is the area behind the house. Therefore, a reasonable person in the appellant's position would have realized he had been trespassing the moment he had wandered into the backyard.
If there is no boundary between the two, and I mean, your client was very well aware that the appellant was there to look for his shoes. He could have been anywhere, counsel. Would that not be reasonable to expect that the appellant would have gone into the backyard as well?
My lord, to answer your question, if the appellant was unsure about the areas of the house, he could have taken the steps to clarify with the respondent or the wife regarding the respective areas of the house.
Counsel, the duty is owed by your client. I don't think you can push the duty away to the appellant in this manner. I don't think that's fair.
The respondent had taken his duty by expressly instructing that the appellant to only enter the backyard, to only enter the garden and not the backyard itself. Therefore, having disregard the instruction itself, the appellant is therefore a trespasser.
Sorry, can I stop you there? You see that permission was given only garden, not the backyard. But I stand to be corrected, but there was no express prohibition, isn't it?
My lady, there is an express permission, and this can be seen in the phone conversation and the face-to-face
Sorry, my
interaction.
question was, there was no express prohibition, not permission. There was nothing told, do not go to the backyard, no prohibition.
Yeah.
My lady, there was no express prohibition, but there was an express instruction to only go to the garden itself.
Where
Therefore,
do you see that is contained? This expressed instruction to only confine the parameters to the garden. Where is this contained? What are you relying on?
this can be seen in his phone conversation and his face-to-face interaction, where he had only instructed the appellant to look for his missing shoes in the garden itself and not any other area.
Proceed.
Much obliged, my lady. Having regards to the point mentioned, it is therefore submitted that the standard of duty of care here will be the one that is owed to a trespasser. And the case of Lembaga Electric Negara and Ramakrishnan accepted that the duty to trespasser arises when the occupier know that a trespasser may come into a place where there is a danger, and this duty is only discharged by an occupier who had taken steps to avoid the danger in accordance with the dictates of common humanity and his circumstances. And to relate with the principles, the respondent accepts that there may be a chance he may have known that the appellant would trespass the backyard, but nonetheless, the duty to trespasser would still be discharged here, as the respondent had taken the sufficient steps according to his circumstances to prevent danger to the appellant. And this is seen through the respondent's action of surrounding the giant pit with construction tape and warning any incoming person to be cautious of the ongoing construction work inside the pit and the dangers that are present on the surrounding, such as the soil on the edge of the pit. Alternatively, If this honorable court decides that the appellant is a licensee, it is submitted that the respondent would still not be liable for the appellant's injury. In regards to the standard of duty owed to a licensee, the following authorities will be referred. Firstly, the case of Datuk Bandar Dewan Bandaraya Kuala Lumpur and Ong Kok Peng held that the standard of duty of care owed by an occupier to a licensee is not to expose him of any hidden danger and to warn him of any hidden danger which exists in the premise. And secondly, the case of Yap Cheng Hock and Kajima Taisei joint venture accepted that a licensee can only call a thing a hidden danger if a reasonable man would have expected it to be one. By applying both of these authorities here, it is submitted that the respondent had not exposed his licensee, which is the appellant, to any hidden danger. First and foremost, a few important facts have to be highlighted. Number one, the appellant had spotted some loose dirt in the pit. Number two, there is a likelihood the construction work and the digging inside the pit may affect the stability of the soil on the surrounding of the pit, such as the edge of the pit. And thirdly, the respondent had used the construction tape to surround the entire perimeter of the pit. After considering all of these factors listed, it is submitted that there are sufficient indicators to suggest that the soil on the edge of the pit can give way and cause injuries. This means,
if you are taking this position that it is reasonable that the soil would be loose, it would mean that your client ought to have warned the appellant of the loose soil, because your client ought to have known about the loose soil as well. Is that not right?
my lord, the respondent had taken the steps to warn the appellant about the...
A construction tape is not a warning.
My lord, to answer your question, a construction tape can be sufficient, as from the facts here, it had sufficiently provided not only a notice about the ongoing construction work, but it also served as an additional warning and deterrent for others to be cautious and to not wander around the surroundings of the pit, such as the edge of the pit where danger is obvious.
If danger was so obvious, you keep going back to this point, counsel, the danger being obvious, wouldn't that mean that your client should have done more, warned the appellant of this danger that was so obvious, as you say?
My lord, given that there are already several indicators that suggest that the danger is obvious and that the soil would give way, it is submitted that there is no need for any other additional warning, as the construction tape itself is already sufficient to provide a warning and a caution for the appellant to not wander around the surroundings of the pit, as the soil may be loose and cause injuries.
Okay, thank you, counsel.
Having regard to what was mentioned, the respondent therefore submits that he did not breach the duty that is owed towards the appellant. It is submitted that even if this honorable court were to find the respondent to have breached a duty to the appellant, the liabilities of the respondent would still be negated, as the defense of voluntary non-fit injuria is applicable here. In the case of Lee Gyok Teng and Ni Tai Hu, it explains that voluntary non-fit injuria means that to which a man consents cannot be considered to be an injury. It further held several factors must be pleaded when raising this defense. Firstly, the facts which the plaintiff was fully appraised had give rise to the risk of injury. Secondly, the plaintiff had understood the risk and injury. And thirdly, the plaintiff had voluntarily undertook to be responsible for the risk. From the facts here, it is submitted that the appellant had fully appraised that there is an ongoing construction work in the giant pit and would have known that there is a risk this may cause the soil from the surroundings, such as the edge of the pit, to be loose and give way. Further, the appellant had understood the risk that is present around the surroundings, as he was aware that there is a construction tape surrounding the entire perimeters of the pit, which can be argued to have provided sufficient warning for everyone to be cautious around the surroundings of the pit. And lastly, the appellant had voluntarily undertook to be responsible for the dangers involved the moment he decided to blatantly disregard the warnings provided by the construction tape, whereby he had stood on the edge of the pit and leaned down under the construction tape in an unreasonable attempt to retrieve the shoes that were approximately 1.5 meters deep in the pit. Having regard to the matters mentioned, it is therefore submitted that voluntary non-fit injuria is applicable here. And to conclude, the respondent therefore submits that the respondent is not liable for the injury suffered by the appellant, and the High Court was correct in its decision. And my ladies and my lord, I see that my time has almost elapsed, and unless I may be of any further assistance to the court, this concludes my submission. My learned co-counsel will now present her submission on the second issue of defamation. May it please this honorable court.
Ladyship and your lordship is ready. I may now start my submission. May it please the Honourable Court, my name is Belle, co-counsel appearing for the respondent Charlie, and I will be dealing with the second ground of appeal. The respondent submits that Charlie does have a cause of action in defamation against Benny in slander. To support an action in slander, may I direct your ladyship and your lordship to the case of Pradeep Kumar and Abdullah Sani bin Hashim, which provided the three elements of slander, which are defamatory words, reference to the claimant, and that the words were transmitted to a third party. On the first element, respondent submits that the words said by Benny were defamatory. The test to determine whether the words are defamatory is a two-stage process provided in the case of Wong Yok Kong and Asmi M. Enchar. This test was also adopted by the Federal Court of Rob Australian Gold Mining Sdn Bhd. The test provides that the first stage is to consider the meaning of the words that would convey to an ordinary person. And then the second stage is to consider whether, under the circumstances, a reasonable person will likely to understand the words in a defamatory sense. On the facts, the alleged defamatory words by Benny are to be understood in a natural and ordinary meaning. By this, the words would mean that Charlie is guilty of breaching the standard operating procedures of COVID-19 and is unprofessional as a member of the Federal Bureau of COVID-19 Prevention Malaysia. As a result, any reasonable person of today's society would understand the words in a defamatory sense. To further support my argument on this, three tests can be relied on to determine whether the words complained of are indeed defamatory. This was seen in the case of Hisham bin Tan Sri Halim and Teh Farida in 2020, which the case provided that a statement is defamatory if A, it tends to lower the plaintiff in the estimation of the right-thinking members of society generally, or B, it causes the plaintiff to be shunned or avoided, or C, it exposes the plaintiff to hatred, contempt, or ridicule. On the facts, Benny's accusation against Charlie for spreading COVID-19.
Counsel, if I may, I think the counsel for the appellant's concern or issue is that the statements were never referred to your client. Can you just address us on that point?
Sure, my lord. On the second element to slander, the respondent submits that the defamatory words indeed referred to Charlie. May I direct your ladyship and your lordship to the House of Lords case of Nuffer and London Express newspaper, page 4, paragraph 119. In this case, Viscount Simon stated in his judgment that where a plaintiff is not named, the test is to test whether the words used would reasonably lead persons acquainted with the plaintiff to believe that he was the person being referred to. This case has been cited by the Federal Court case of Rob Australian Gold Mining, as I have submitted earlier. Therefore, it is binding to the Court of Appeal herein. On the facts, the defamatory words told by Benny reached some important people in the health ministry, and Charlie was sacked as a result from the Bureau. This indicates that the people who are acquainted with Charlie, meaning those important people from the health ministry, believe that Charlie was the person being referred to in the defamatory statement by Benny. Therefore,
But does it make a difference that no specific reference was made to Charlie? Does that have any bearing?
my lady, could you repeat that question? I did not quite get that.
Does it make a difference from your argument that no specific reference was made to Charlie? Does that make a difference?
My lady, are you asking whether the difference of the words high-ranking member are a difference to what I'm submitting?
What I'm saying, in other words, is that where there is no specific reference made by name, that have any bearing to your argument?
It is submitted that by virtue of the case of Nuffer and London Express newspaper, it is sufficient that if the person who are acquainted to Charlie, if they believe that Charlie was the person being referred to, there shall be sufficient reference to that. As I have submitted, this would amount as sufficient evidence that the defamatory words communicated to the health ministry was referring to Charlie. Thereby, this second element of slander is satisfied.
When I'm looking, I find that very difficult to accept, counsel. When I'm looking at the statement here, a high-ranking member of the COVID-19 Prevention Bureau living in La Mirage has been going around town spreading COVID-19. That's hardly, and we know that there are a few high-ranking officials that are staying there. That could be anyone. How are we supposed to agree with you on that, counsel? Is that help us with that?
Yes, I agree with that, my lord. There are probably a lot of members living in La Mirage. May I please direct your ladyship and your lordship to the clarification document of the moot problem, page 2, specifically clarification number 8, which stated that there are several members in the bureau living in La Mirage, and Charlie was the highest ranking member who lives there. Therefore, as Benny had told his friends of the words high-ranking member, their first response would be thinking of Charlie, because Charlie is the highest-ranking member in the bureau that is living in La Mirage. Moreover, Charlie is the direct member of Benny. Benny's friends would be capable of referring to the high-ranking member as Charlie. The facts and the clarification did not state that there are other high-ranking members living there except for Charlie, who is considered to be the highest-ranking member. Therefore, I submit that the defamatory words are capable of referring to Charlie. Does your lordship and your ladyship require any clarification that I have submitted on this element?
From my end, thank you.
Please proceed, counsel.
On the last element, the respondent submits that the defamatory words were transmitted to third parties. May I direct your ladyship and your lordship to the case of Pradeep Kumar and Abdullah bin Sani bin Hashim. This case stated that once it has been proven that slanderous words have been transmitted to third party, it would fulfill the most ingredient of slander. Based on clear facts, Benny had said the defamatory words to his friends in the neighborhood, meaning that the words were verbally communicated to his friends. Therefore, the slanderous words have been transmitted to third parties, thereby proving the third element of slander. Upon proving all three elements of slander, it is submitted that the appellant is liable in defamation by slander against the respondent. Further, the respondent would like to submit that it is not necessary for Charlie to prove that special damage was suffered as a direct result of the defamatory words said by Benny. My lady and my lord, the general rule is that an action for slander requires special damage. However, Charlie's case falls under one of the exceptions, which is pursuant to Section 5 of the Defamation Act 1957. Therefore, it is actionable per se. This is because the words uttered by Benny were calculated to disparage Charlie in his office, who, at the material time, Charlie had held the office of the Federal Bureau of the COVID-19 Prevention Malaysia. As explained in the case of JB Random and Goh Chok Tong, slanderous words that impute misconduct in the discharge of such office of honor would show that the words were calculated to disparage a person in his office. Therefore, by applying this case, the words that Benny had used a high-ranking officer, a high-ranking member of the Prevention Bureau, going around town spreading COVID-19, told by Benny to his friends, who impute that Charlie has been breaching the COVID-19 standard operating procedures, which would amount as a misconduct, and also it would imply that he is unfit to do his job since he himself is part of the Federal Bureau. Therefore, the words were calculated to disparage him in his office. Additionally, the respondent would like to submit that even if the appellant raised the defense of fair comment, the defense will fail on the ground that there was malice when Benny said the defamatory words. May I direct your ladyship and your lordship to a Supreme Court case of S. Pakian Nathan and Jenny Ibrahim. This case provides that where the defendant purposely abstained from inquiring into the facts or avail himself from acquiring information in order not to ascertain the truth, when the truth can be just found out as with the slightest inquiry, malice may be rightly inferred. On the facts, Benny did not inquire into the facts to find out the truth of the statement that was screamed by Charlie's wife. He did not also bother asking Charlie or Charlie's wife or anyone else on whether Amanda did actually contract COVID, but rather he went on to tell his friends that a high-ranking member of the Bureau has been spreading COVID, which this had referred to Charlie as I have submitted earlier. Under this circumstance...
Can I just interject you there? Was there even a need to find out the veracity of the statement, given that he could hear this screaming conversation taking place? What was there a need to go and inquire further?
We need to inquire into the facts because my learned friend has raised the defense of fair comment. In order to sustain this defense,
yes, but counsel, I think the chair lady's question is simple. It was very obvious, wasn't it? There was this screaming going on. He had just fallen, just sprained his foot. You want him to then go and ask questions some more, is it?
Based on the accusation that Benny had accused of Charlie, which is spreading COVID, this is a serious accusation which should have been verified with the truth. Therefore, malice is inferred if he did not went to verify with Charlie or his wife that whether Amanda had contracted COVID. Because if not, he wouldn't have made the comment that Charlie has been going around town spreading COVID.
And what of the defense of justification, counsel?
On the defense of justification, my learned friend have stated that even though the statement must not be wholly true, it must be substantially true. However, there are no factual basis for Benny to make that comment because Charlie's wife only said that Charlie and her had only came into contact with Amanda. It is not equivalent to Benny's words of going around town spreading COVID when it has not been proven that Charlie has contracted COVID, given the fact that Amanda did not actually contracted COVID.
I think the point here, counsel, would be that the statement made by the wife, Charlie's wife, was that Amanda does have COVID, regardless of the fact that, later on it was found out that she didn't. But at that point in time, the statement of fact was made, she does have COVID. And as far as Benny was concerned, he had interactions with Charlie. And so obviously he would be concerned. And so therefore it was as true as it could be as far as to him. And that's why he made those statements. Is that not justification?
Yes, I acknowledge that Benny would be concerned if he heard of the words. However, Benny did not say that, use the words, I think Charlie may have contracted COVID because he came into contact with Amanda. As your lordship had mentioned earlier, if he did not use the word I think or in my opinion, it would become a statement of fact instead of a comment. Therefore, the defense of fair comment cannot stand.
But what about the justification defense, counsel? I think we are there.
It has not been proven true that Charlie has actually contracted COVID. Therefore, the justification defense cannot stand. It will be defeated since it has not been proven to be the truth.
I see. Okay.
Does your ladyship and your lordship has require any more clarifications on this part of my list?
No, not from my end, thank you. Assistant, no.
Upon proving three elements of slander earlier, it is submitted that the appellant is liable in defamation by slander against the respondent. The High Court decision is correct based on those grounds that I have submitted, which are the words are defamatory and that the words referred to Charlie and that the words were transmitted to Benny's friends. We humbly pray that the appeal will be dismissed with cause. My lady and my lord, unless I may be of any further assistance to the court, this concludes my submission on behalf of the respondent.
My ladies and my lord, may I now proceed to my rebuttals?
Yes, please.
Right. My ladies and my lord, so the appellant has a few quick points which I like to address from my learned opponent's argument. There are three main points on the issue of occupier's liability and three main points for defamation. So the first issue I'd like to address is that the appellant is not a trespasser. So there is implied permission that the appellant is permitted to access the whole outdoor area in order to look for his shoes, since the respondent should be well aware that the appellant is determined to look for his Air Jordan, which costs a whopping 250,000. Besides that, there are no discernible boundaries separating the backyard and garden. Therefore, it shall not be the appellant's duty to identify where exactly the boundary is, especially when he is so focused on looking for his shoes. Also, there is no express prohibition given by the respondent to enter the backyard. Therefore, we can conclude that the appellant is still a licensee. The second point would be that the construction tape as a warning is insufficient. The respondent could have warned the appellant of the construction pit even if he is not aware of the loose soil. In that sense, the appellant would have been more careful in the course of looking around the outdoor area of the respondent's premises.
Sorry,
Even if
can I stop you there?
Yes, my lady.
Is there a need to, given that it was your client that elected to go under the tape?
Well, to address my lady's question, we would like to point out that the very factor which led our client fall into the pit is actually not because of him leaning towards the pit, but it's actually due to the loose soil, which is outside the pit and outside the construction tape. So if the respondent has given warning that the appellant shall not go near the construction pit, the appellant would not go near and he would not lean towards the pit in the view of getting his shoes. So we are trying to convey that the warning given by the respondent is not sufficient. May I proceed? All right. To further persuade the court that the loose soil is a concealed danger or a hidden danger, the appellant would like to point to the case of Yap Cheng Hock and Kajima. In this case, the court held that the projection of rock in the tunnel amounts to a concealed danger because it is not visible to the eye. In the present case, equally, the loose soil amounts to a concealed danger because the appellant could not tell that the soil is loose and dangerous by just looking at the surface of the soil. Therefore, we conclude that the danger is actually a concealed danger. The third issue that we would like to address is the defense of voluntary non-fit injuria raised by the respondent. The appellant contends that this defense shall fail since there was no express consent to the risk of danger for two reasons. First, there was no warning given to the appellant to warn him of the danger. And second, since the appellant did not know of the danger posed by the loose soil, he cannot be said to have consented to the risk. Now I'll move on to the rebuttals for defamation. So the first point that we would like to address is the elements of defamation did not refer to Charlie specifically. Once again, we would like to affirm that the appellant's statement did not sufficiently refer to the respondent, because what is made by the appellant is that a high-ranking member, not highest-ranking member. Moving on to the second issue, we would like to address on the element of malice. The appellant is of the view that there is no malice in this case. We would like to rely on the case of Raup Australian Gold Mining Sendran Berhad and Hu Xie Li, whereby the federal court interpreted malice as acting intentionally without just cause or excuse. In the present case, there is just cause. The explanation given is because Mr. Benny did not make up the facts himself. It is based on what he heard from Mr. Charlie's wife. And after knowing that Mr. Charlie might have been in close contact with Amanda, and as such, he himself might have contracted COVID-19, it is the appellant's duty to warn the neighbors to avoid Mr. Charlie for their own safety. So we submit that there's just cause. Secondly, we also like to prove that there's no malice.
To interrupt, but your time is up.
My ladies and my lord, may I ask for an extension of 1.5 minutes, perhaps? I have one last point to address.
1 minute.
All right, thank you, my lady. So we would like to also point to the case of Ortus expert White Sendran Berhad and Reka. It was stated in this case that the threshold to prove the element of malice is a high one, and that should not be easily inferred. In this case, the appellant spread the impugned words as he sought to uphold a social and moral duty and to also uphold the public interest. The failure to verify the respondent's COVID-19 status is not per se evidence of malice, especially as the appellant honestly trusted the conversation he overheard of Charlie's wife and Charlie. Therefore, the appellant honestly believed that the conversation is true and it is not out of malice. The last issue we would like to address is the statement made by the appellant is substantially true. Therefore, the defense of justification pleaded shall succeed. It cannot be disputed that the appellant had overheard the conversation between Charlie's wife and Charlie. And due to the high contagious nature of COVID-19, it is possible for Mr. Charlie, who came into close contact to Amanda, to have contracted the COVID-19.
But Appellant 2, your time is up.
All right, I think that is all from us. Thank you.
Please, the Honorable Court, I will be now submitting on the rebuttals, the surrebuttals. I apologize. In response to the appellant's rebuttals, which was submitted that the appellant is not a trespasser, the respondent submits that he is a trespasser as the respondent never intended the appellant to wander into the backyard. Moreover, the duty to a trespasser here is discharged as the respondent had done the sufficient steps based on the circumstances to prevent the danger from happening, which is the construction tape. Secondly, the appellant had rebutted that the respondent had breached his duty to his licensee. The respondent submits that it is apparent and obvious that the soil on the edge of the pit would give away as construction works are ongoing nearby. Therefore, the respondent did not breach any duty to the appellant, which is the licensee, as there were no hidden dangers involved. On the third point, the appellant rebuts that the voluntary defense is not available to the respondent. However, we submit that the defense of voluntary is available given that all the required elements are fulfilled in my learned counsel's submission. On the fourth point, my learned friends have rebutted that there is no sufficient reference to Charlie. The respondent submits that the fact that Charlie had been sacked as a result is already sufficient evidence to prove that the defamatory words communicated to the Health Ministry was referring to him. On the next point, my learned friend has submitted that no malice was proven. However, as I have submitted earlier in the Supreme Court case of S. Pakian Nathan and Jenny Ibrahim, it is binding on the Court of Appeal. Therefore, the Honorable Court must follow the principle of the law. As submitted earlier, malice is inferred Since Benny did not inquire into the facts to verify the truth of the words said by Charlie's wife and went on to accuse Charlie of spreading COVID, given the fact that Amanda did not actually contract COVID. Therefore, the appellant is not entitled to the defense of fair comment. Moreover, my learned friend has submitted that it does not necessarily need to be proven true that for a defense of fair comment. However, I submit that there are no factual basis for Benny to make the comment because because Charlie's wife only mentioned that they had came into contact with Amanda and did not say that Charlie has contracted COVID. It's not equivalent to the words of going around town spreading COVID, given the fact that even Amanda has not contracted COVID. My lord and my lady, unless I may be of any further assistance to the court, this concludes my rebuttals for the respondent.
Thank you, Counsel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, counsel.
This honorable court is now adjourned. Judges will now be moved into a breakout room for the deliberation and scoring session, whereas the participants will remain in this room. Judges, you'll be invited back into this main room once you have finished the scoring. Thank you. To those watching this live stream, please sit tight and stay tuned for the judges' comments. We will resume this live stream with the participants' feedback session once the judges have completed their deliberation. In the meantime, please enjoy some pictures from the first 2 competition days. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the grand finals of Taylor's Internal Mooting Competition 2022. We would now like to invite the judges to give their comments on the moot round.
I'll invite my brother and sister first to proceed. But just as an overview, all of you did very well, we think. So if I can invite ladies first. So my learned sister Janet, if you could go ahead first, please.
Yes, echoing my co-panelist, I think all of you did very well. We gathered that you're all beginners. Some of you are first-time mooters. And so for that, I really applaud all of you. I think all of you did very well in your presentation. So the points that I'm just gonna give a couple of general points, which I think is going to assist you when you do decide to go into practice. I think in terms of the merits of the case, there is clearly one side which has got a better case on the merits. And I think the team that has to argue for the appeal definitely had a bit more to handle. And so the points that you could make would also be a lot more difficult than the respondents' team. But it's still very important that you bear in mind the facts that you have, the brief that you've been given. You want to try and make the best of your case, but you want to bear in mind that you don't want to overstate your case. Yeah, so there is a difference in terms of pitching the facts at its best, and there is it's very different from overstating the facts. So if the facts are not there, it's best not to speculate, don't make assumptions, just state that based on the facts, this is the case, so it is your conclusion that, or you can infer from the fact that this is the fact, and therefore you make your conclusion. So don't go into like, there must have honestly believed, and then that would twist or put the facts in very different light. And that's very important because when you do go into practice, the judges must know that they are able to rely on you in stating the facts very clearly and very accurately. If at all they feel that, you know, there is a tendency for one to overstate the facts, then that's not of assistance to the bench. Yeah. The second thing that I wanted to make as a general observation is in presenting a case, I'm not sure whether you have been taught to present your case in a particular way, where you always start off with the law. It's very important that, of course, you get the law right, but I think it's also very important that you present your case in a very more punchy manner, so that you are able to grab the attention of the judge. And you do this by just telling your best points first. Yeah, you can get into your best points first, and then you then go into the law. The law should be stated in support of the good facts that you have, or the best facts that you have, as opposed to always citing the law, and then the gist of the facts is then lost. Yeah, so those are the 2 points that I have to make. If you have any questions, I think you can always stay on a little while longer so that you can then ask us questions later. I'll turn now to, well, I'll let my co-panelists have the floor.
Thanks, Janet. Okay, first of all, very good job, guys. Really, I think it was, we all think it was a really good effort. We're not just saying it, but we actually feel that way. All right, so kudos to all 4 of you. I'll just address some of the points that I feel are important, that are good. I felt that you guys did, and maybe something that you guys can work on. for the appellants, all right? For the appellants, what I really liked about how you guys strategized your submissions were that you picked on the elements that you want to attack, all right? So you didn't attack every single element. You said, look, this is the point that that I want to focus on, and you just focus on that, and you didn't go through the whole kind of like the area of law, which really isn't very necessary when you are dealing with a real case. It's very different when you're answering an exam question, but in a real case, you're actually really just harping and hammering on that one point that you think is the strongest. So I like that you did that. Okay, what I didn't quite like was how there were certain assumptions. I think the overstating of the case, that is very dangerous. That's something we want to steer clear from, because the moment you do that, the moment the judges realize that actually what you're saying isn't there in the facts, you lose credibility, right? When you lose credibility, how can the judge believe anything else you say, right? So it's very important that you tread that balance very, very carefully. Okay, so you want to be clear about what are the facts that are in your favor, that is strong for you. You want to focus on that. The judge might tell you, no, but the facts actually say this. You're gonna have to be able to tell the judge, yes, I understand that, but that doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that this was the direct cause of Charlie being sacked. Just an example, right? The statement being made, yes, Charlie lost his job, Charlie was sacked. It doesn't prove that the statement is what caused Charlie, because if you look at the statement and the statement alone, and that is what we are concerned with, so you don't get sucked into this rabbit hole where the judge is talking about, oh, but Charlie got sacked. Because your point here is, but the statement never referred to Charlie. So I mean, it is anyone's guess. The point here is, if we look at the statement alone, just an example, if we look at the statement alone, there is no specific reference to Charlie. So clearly, the second element for defamation has not been established. Just an example. Okay, so we want to be very clear about what facts are for us and be able to bring the judge to focus on that instead of, because in a moot, and in fact in a real case, there will always be points that are for you and against you. I think that is reality. And what that means is you need to be very smart about how you want to focus on certain things. You're not misleading the court to say that something that is there but it's not there, but it's about focusing. All right, so I think that is something the appellants can work on. For the respondents, what I thought you guys did was that you guys listened to the questions, you guys sought to answer the questions, you guys sought to understand the questions, you guys addressed the questions, I think, to a certain level of satisfaction of the judges. Okay, so for the respondents, I think you guys did that well. And so in mooting, and of course also in real life, actually it really annoys the judge if you don't answer the question, or you don't at least try to satisfactorily address the issue. Because when they ask the question, it's not because they want to throw you off necessarily, it's because they need help to understand whether or not there's authority, for instance, to support a certain proposition that you're making. I think for the respondents, you guys did that to some extent, so good job on that. Now, the respondent's role, what you could have done, I think, better is to respond. You are the respondent, respond. You don't have to tell me what every single point, what are the elements to establish occupier's liability. In fact, that's actually the appellant's job. You don't have to tell me what are the elements to establish occupier's liability. You don't have to tell me every single element for defamation either, because that's the appellant's job. But what you have to do is to look at what the appellant said, because it demonstrates to me as the judge that you were listening, that you're going to address what the appellant said head on, you're going to take it. And so, for instance, what the respondents didn't do was address the defense of justification until it was asked, when actually the appellants raised it in their submissions. If the appellants raised it, as the respondent, you have to address it, unless, of course, you are conceding. You see, if the judge doesn't ask about it, then they might take, oh, you got no response, that means you got nothing to say about it, that means you concede. But that can't be the case. You hear what I'm saying, respondents? So you want to make it a response, okay? Listen to what the appellants are saying, what are the points that they're hammering on, and then in your response, in your submissions, to use that time wisely, as opposed to going through all of the elements to just hit on the points that the appellants are raising. Then we can see the real contention between the appellants and the respondents. I think that's what makes litigation, mooting, whether it's it's mooting or in real life. I think that's where you really find that conflict, that tug of war. That is what litigation is about. Okay, so to hone in on the issues. Otherwise, you're just giving a law lecture. We all know what the law is, and then where does it bring us? So something to bear in mind for the appellants. I hope those feedback actually helps you to plan better the next time you do this. And I really hope that there will be a next time for all four of you, because I think you guys can do it with sufficient practice and exposure. And I hope you guys make sure that you guys have that exposure and practice to do so. Okay, I'm done.
Kenneth and Janet, and like my co-panelists, I too echo that all of you did a great job. One thing that I did find consistent amongst all, that it appears that all of you have this prepared script and seem to be delivering from it. You no doubt have very sound knowledge of the law and so forth, but when it comes to presentation, this is where you can take ownership of it. So you know the facts, now it's the application of it. So rather than reading from that script, you need to own it. So you know what your best points are. So like what Kenneth has said, put your best points forward. And it was more a case where you have all this, but because this is how I put it out in my submission, this is how I'm going to address it. So one thing you need to be able to do is have that ability to adapt. So the moment you know what your best points are, you know what the other side is saying, so attack it at the outset. That's what we mean when we say, you listen, take ownership. You got your points there. So now it's for you to deliver it, because sometimes in court, you go with this 30-page, 50-page submission, but you won't even get through half of it. If you are unable to convince the judges within the first 10 minutes, you'll be out of there. They will switch off already, particularly in the Court of Appeal. So, we all go with volumes and volumes, but the reality is never actually go through all of that. They will make up their mind within that first 10 minutes. Got to convince them already, and that's why it's important to start with your strength first. Of course, you can't run away from the fact that you have weak points. All cases have got your plus factors and your negative factors, but that's why you start with the strength first, so that you're able to persuade them to see things in a certain light, and you keep the worst for the later parts. When you're asked, then of course you have to address it, right? You can't pull the wool over their eyes either. But the point is to play on your strengths. And the other observation is, whilst all of you were prepared, it didn't seem like you truly believed in your case. That speaking with conviction, that part I found lacking. So all did the delivery, but it's that you really believe in that case for your client. But it's a case of, okay, all right, this is what I have to do, and I'll just do it. But it makes a difference when you put your points across with conviction, and that's where your oratorical skills come about. Because sometimes even if you have a weak case, but you're so good at persuading the panel, you're able to turn them around. That's the powers of persuasion with your oratorical skills. And the other thing is on cases. Now, all had cases, but what you should not do is put case after case in the federal court. This was what was decided. In the Court of Appeal, this is what was decided. because the judges, when you go before them, they know what the law is. So just have to say, all right, federal court has already decided in this case, the point is this, but don't go on the basis of this was held in this case, this was held. That's the part you should avoid. So it's rather, what is the principle that you take away from that case? And naturally, of course, the higher the court, the stronger the position. Then the questions, yes. Now, whilst all of you made that attempt, what we also notice is that because you've got your prepared script, the moment someone throws a question in, it sort of takes you off balance. No? And then you need time to compose yourself, come back, track. But it's good. You managed to do that. And as what Kenneth has already said, it's important to understand the question. Don't give an answer just because this is what I know, I'm just going to say it out. Listen to the question. Is that what is really being asked of you? Rather than, I know this, so I will say this. Okay, that's the other point I think I wanted to make. Aside from that, nothing else. I think all of you did exceptionally well. So well done. Do any of you have any other questions for us? I think not. So I'll leave it to you, Claire, then.
Thank you, judges. We'll now proceed with the photography session. Adriana will take the picture.
Hello, everyone. I'll be taking 2 pictures. Please look into your cameras and smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Sorry. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Please give me a minute while I check the photos. The pictures are good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So we've now come to the end of the grand final round of Taylor's Internal Mooting Competition 2022. For those of you who have joined us for the live stream, please sit tight and stay tuned as we will commence the award ceremony momentarily. Judges, you may now leave the meeting or stay on in this call to join us for the award ceremony. Thank you and have a nice day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, and all the best. Bye.
Thank you, judges, for your time.
Good job, everybody, and all the best.
Thank you.
Okay, so participants, we are still in the midst of tabulating the results, and so the closing ceremony will start shortly. But in the meantime, we're gonna just play some slides and some music, so you can just turn off your cameras and have a good rest after the round. Congratulations, you all did very well.
All right, everyone, we'll be starting the reward ceremony shortly, so please sit tight and relax. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to wish you all a warm welcome to the award ceremony of Taylor's Internal Mooting Competition 2022. To those of you watching the live stream, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here this evening. We know that you are waiting and very excited to know who the winner of the competition is. However, we have to unfortunately get some formalities out of the way. So I'll quickly pass it over to Nimesha to deliver a short speech. Nime, over to you.
Thank you, Adrian, for referring to my speech as something unfortunate that we all have to endure. But yes, thank you very much. I know as well that my speech isn't the main event that you're all eagerly waiting for. So I promise to keep this short, but very, very sweet. So I would like to start by congratulating all of the participants for the massive stride that you have all taken by participating in this competition, which for many of you is actually your first mooting competition. So mooting can be possibly one of the most daunting experiences that a law student can undertake. But I'm sure, as you've all learned and you've all discovered, it is one of the most rewarding experiences that you can have. It's not easy to stand before an esteemed lawyer, or I suppose in this situation, to sit before a screen with an esteemed lawyer on it and try to convince them of your case. It takes immense courage to do so, and it's something that not everyone can say they were able to do in their time at law school. So I'm going to come full circle and repeat what I told you during the opening ceremony of the competition, which is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I know it's very cheesy, but it's true. And I hope that for all of you, this is not the end of your mooting journey, and that you've all begun to develop a love for the very frustrating sport that we call mooting, and that you will continue to stay with you throughout your time as a law student. So congratulations to all of you for taking the first step. And we hope and we are very excited to see what else you do with your mooting career. So the speech will not be complete without, as always, thanking all the wonderful people who made this competition possible. First and foremost, the judges who have judged the moots over the past 2 days, who were willing to take time out of their very hectic schedules and the little precious off time that they have to nurture our young mooters and to teach you all how to become better mooters and eventually one day better lawyers as well. To Taylor's Law School and all of our lecturers, especially those who came and judged the moots and supported us, Mr. Hacharan, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Lai, and especially our head of school, Dr. Har Mahinder Singh, for believing in us and always giving us the opportunity to prove ourselves and to establish ourselves as a society. To our very special moot master, Mr. Hacharan Singh, who is here now, for his continuous support of the society. No matter how big or how small we were and we are, he has continued to support us and he has stood behind us every step of the way. And I think that is something we are very, very lucky to have. Next, our wonderful volunteers who spent many, many hours of their weekends with us, making sure that they would be prepared for this competition and that they would be prepared to help all of you out. You are all invaluable, and this competition could not have been the success that it was without all of you. And last but not least, the amazing organizing committee, my board of directors of Taylor's Mooting Society. Adrian, Eng Hong, Kelly, Xiao Cheng, Evelyn, and Uthra for working so tirelessly over the past few months to make sure that every element of this competition was well thought through and would run smoothly. I would say, well, first of all, congratulations, because I think we did a wonderful job. Pat myself on the back. And also thank you very much for being with me through this journey. So I hope that was short enough for everyone's liking. I'm now going to pass it back to Adrian so that we can proceed with the announcement of the winners. Thank you.
Thank you, Nimesha, for the very kind and very heartwarming words. So without further ado, we will now proceed to the part which everyone has been waiting for. So again, I would like to invite Nimesha to kickstart the announcement of the award winners. Over to you, Nimi.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Eng Hong. So welcome everyone officially to the award ceremony for Taylor's Internal Mooting Competition 2022. So to start off, we are first going to announce the awards for the best oralists of the general rounds. So we actually have quite a few ties. We are supposed to be giving awards to the top 5 speakers, but even within those, you guys, it was really fierce competition and there were many ties. So to begin with, the 5th best oralist for the general rounds with a total of 252 speaker points, we have Chen from team 1003. Okay, everyone please clap. I would like you to use your emojis or unmute yourself and clap so that we can feel like it's a real award ceremony. The 4th best oralist for the general round goes to, with a speaker score of 253 points, Tan Ka-yin from team 1004. I hope you can all hear my applause. Next, the 3rd best oralist for the general rounds, we have actually a tie here with a speaker score of 258 points. We have firstly, Teng from team 1003, Amelia Lai May from team 1006, and finally, Iris Pang Zihui from team 1010. There's a nice alliteration with that being 3 third best oralists. So I'm quite happy with that. Okay, moving on to the 2nd best oralist for the general rounds. We have, with a speaker score of 260 points, Belle Li from team 1012. And finally, the best oralist for the general rounds, although I suppose it's a grammatical error and it should be the best oralists for the general rounds because we have a tie with a speaker score of 262. We have firstly, Li Jia Kai from team 1002 and Xia Xin En from team 1010. So congratulations to all of the best oralists. If you are one of the best oralists, please don't leave. Please stay on because we will have a photography session at the end of the award ceremony. So now, moving on to what everyone's been waiting for, the best oralist for the grand final round before the actual winners of the competition. So the best oralist for the grand final round on a 2-1 split is Chow Yong from team 1012. And finally, the champion for TIMC 2022 is unanimously team 1012, Chow Yong and Belle Li. Congratulations, guys. And that makes the runner-ups of TIMC 2022, Team 1003, Teng and Chen. Congratulations to all the award winners. I'm now going to pass it back to Adrian to quickly wrap up the ceremony.
Okay, thank you, Nimesha. So with that, this brings us to the end of Taylor's Internal Mooting Competition 2022. Now, before we end, like Nimesha has mentioned, we would like to kindly request that all the award recipients stay on this Zoom call for a quick photography session. Again, thank you so much to everyone who has been staying with us to watch the live stream, and thank you to everyone who has made this competition possible and a huge success. Have a good evening and a good night, everyone. Thank you and bye-bye.